Welcome to the Healthy Parenting Connector. I'm Katie Kimball for Kids Cook Real Food, here to connect you, parents who really want to raise healthy kids, with the experts who have the information they need. Today, I'm honored to have Erin Taylor, a certified parent coach through the Parenting Coaching Institute, with me today. Thanks for being here, Erin.
Thanks, Katie. It's such a pleasure to join you and your audience.
Well, we plan to learn a lot from you. And you know, at Kids Cook Real Food, we talk about connection, confidence, and creativity. And I really do think that we need to connect with our kids even while we're disciplining them and have confidence in our own parenting techniques. So that's kind of the goal for today, as well as kicking stress and chaos to the curb, right? Because when we're feeling stressed, we're not feeling confident, we're probably not making the best parenting decisions. So let me officially introduce you to Erin, and then we'll jump into the fun part. Erin Taylor's a certified parent coach. She's a motivational speaker, host of the Powerful Parenting for Today's Kids podcast, and most importantly, I always say, a mother of 4. She has a master's in counseling psychology and has a published book, Connection Kindness, the key to changing the world through parenting. And what a perfect fit for the Healthy Parenting Connector. I love it. Erin also founded Revolutionizing Life, a company dedicated to supporting therapists, coaches, and other professionals trying to make a difference in the world. And that's like an online school for parents and children. And we're going to kind of talk about Erin's background a little bit, and how a lot of, really tragic, sad things have been the genesis of growing this mission to help other parents. So again, thank you for being here, Erin. And do you want to tell us a little bit about kind of the start of your story?
Well, if we go way, way back to the beginning, not the actual beginning, but when I was about 11 years old, that's kind of when I realized that I wanted to help families.
Wow.
I knew that I was in the midst of a very wonderful childhood. I was aware of that, but I was aware of it because I was seeing kids at school who weren't having the same experiences as me. And I knew that they were missing out on something really, really great that I was blessed to have in my life. And my mom, as I was thinking about this more recently, I realized that my mom and dad had both gone through some traumatic things in their childhoods. But I remember my mom through my whole childhood saying, I refused to allow to have your childhood look anything like mine. I was not going to have any of that stuff be a part of your life. And so the things that she went through, it's so easy for parents to repeat the cycle, whether it's a positive or a negative cycle. But my mom was so forward thinking in her ability and her intention to break that cycle single-handedly.
Wow.
And I would say she did it remarkably well with no help except just a resolute intention that that's how it was going to be.
And for you to be so perceptive at age 11 to realize that you had something special, what a way to honor your mother.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, it was, I knew it. It was so obvious to me. I met kids at school who they just weren't growing up that way with that love and that connection, and with their parents just having the absolute faith and belief in them, and being interested in actually being with them and spending time with them. And I knew that every child deserved this, even though they weren't getting it. Every single child, no matter who they are, no matter where they come from, no matter what their background is, every single child deserves this. Every parent listening deserved this, whether you got it or not. Everyone deserves this. And so it just became my passion to do what I could to help every child to be able to experience what is our birthright, in my opinion.
Yeah, so that's really directed your professional life and the studies in college, your choice of career. And always, having children changes everything. What did the process of becoming a parent do for you and for the way you connect with other parents?
Well, I had a rather sideways entrance into, or maybe upside down entrance into parenting.
Okay.
I my husband and I got married. We were college sweethearts, and we thought, oh, we'll just, we'll graduate, we'll get married, we'll build our family, we'll have our jobs, everything will be perfect. And we had this ideal situation in our minds. But then when it came to the family building part, it wasn't really happening the way we had envisioned it.
Mm.
So then we went through years of infertility treatments and things like that. And 3 of our 4 children the first 3 are actually IVF babies. So I have the experience of going through that kind of suffering and heartache and roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
And then when our first daughter was born, she was born with a very severe heart defect. And she actually died from that heart defect when she was just 24 days old.
Oh my goodness.
So I have that experience too. And then when we had our son after our daughter, I thought that parenting would be so easy for me because I had studied it my entire life. I knew I wanted to be a parent and help parents my entire life. And I had already lost my daughter. So I knew what a deep blessing parenting really was, and what an honor it is to be able to have the tremendous responsibility to bring a child into adulthood, to usher them into adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out not to be as easy as I thought it would be.
Oh no.
Because we all uh, our kids don't come with manuals, and we have these preconceived notions of what parenting will be like or what our children will be like. And then 99% of the time, the experience is not what the fantasy that we've created in our minds. And I think the very first disconnect for parents is when they realize this is not what I was expecting, and this child is not who I had envisioned. What am I like? What has happened to my life? Where did my ideal life go? And so I think that's the first struggle that most parents I talk to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not until you can kind of understand that your job isn't to create or program your child like a computer to be the vision of what you had in your mind. Your job is to put the right lenses on and see your child for who it is they are, and then figure out what you need to do to honor their being and create a space for them to thrive and for them to become the fullest expression of who they are. And that's not going to look anything like what you probably were thinking before they arrived in your life.
Mm-hmm. So there's a real shedding of expectation there. And you talk a lot
Yes.
about mindset. Does that play in here? Mindset on us and them and parenting versus parent stuff?
I think you said the most important word, expectations.
Mm.
We can have expectations before our children are born about who and what they will be. But then on a smaller scale, we can have expectations for how quiet they will be when we go to a restaurant, for how easily they will willingly get dressed in the outfit that we want them to be dressed in the morning, for how they're going to eat their broccoli and peas at dinner time. We can have all these micro expectations. And then if they're not living up to those expectations, where does that leave us? That leaves us frustrated, resentful, irritable. Maybe we're yelling at our kids, punishing them. And if we step back for a minute, we can realize that all they're doing is being themselves. All
Mm.
they're doing is showing up in their true, authentic nature. And their true nature may be more easygoing, it may be more hard driving and bull in the china shop and determined with their ideas. It could be anything on the spectrum of what their energy could be like, but our job is to recognize who they are and what their energy is, and then to try to work with it instead of battling it all the time.
Mm. Okay. Do you have like practice? Because this all sounds philosophically wonderful to me. Like, I'm like, yes, yes, that's perfect. But like practically in the trenches, are there systems or strategies for parents to use?
Well, I would say the very first thing that parents can do is to take a deep breath.
Okay.
That's the very first thing, because I think, no one can trigger us like our children. No one can push our buttons the way they can.
So
And
true.
it's not, I hear so many parents talking about, oh, my kid pushes my buttons, or parents of older kids, oh, you don't have kids yet, or your kids aren't teenagers yet, just wait. Oh boy, you better buckle your seatbelt. And it just creates so much fear and so much anxiety for us as parents. And there's enough to be concerned about keeping our kids safe and healthy that we don't need to add unnecessary stuff to it.
Hmm.
And so I think that when you first feel the pangs of worry and anxiety and stress and resentment and all this stuff, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing, and how did it get like this, and I don't know what to do next. Just just take a deep breath. Try to like loosen up some of that tension that you have built up inside of you, some of that fear.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're parenting from a place of fear, you're not going to think clearly. You're going to find yourself embroiled in power struggles and battles. You're going to react in ways that you regret later. Nothing is going to be good. And then you're going to disconnect from your child, because your child can sense your desperate clinging from your fear, and all they want is freedom. They want to be able to fly and be free and breathe. And if you're hovering over them and suffocating them with your fear, it doesn't get you anywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that
So
makes perfect sense.
So I would say a deep breath is the very first thing. I mean, you could do that in 1 second, right? That's the first step. And then I think from there, it's really about trying to step back from the situation that you're struggling with at the moment and see if you can see it. Like, we say we can't see the forest for the trees. See if you
Mm-hmm.
can step far enough back that you can see the whole picture, not how your kid let you down or how they didn't listen or how angry you were with them, but step back further than that. Step
Mm.
back from today's interaction or yesterday's argument. Step back and see if you can see a pattern. See if you can see where things went off track. See if you can see the deeper root of what the actual issue is. If you can start to get to the root of the issue and address that with them, then you're going to be much more effective. Because if you're just dealing on the surface of their behavior, they're talking back, they're not listening, they won't clean their room, whatever it is that they're doing, you're not going to get anywhere if you're just dealing with that, because you're just going to keep butting heads. But if you get down lower underneath of that and see, every time I ask you to clean your room, you're not really doing it, or you're telling me no, or you're not getting around to it. Let's talk about that. Why do you seem to not want to clean your room? What's going on there? And approach the situation rather than trying to control it or change it or fix it or stop it. Just approach it with curiosity.
Mm.
And if you and then there's no fear, right? It's just more about, I'm really curious. I'm asking you to do this and you're not doing it, or I would think you'd be doing this, but you're doing the opposite. And I'm curious about why. That has a whole different energy than, we need to talk about the fact that you are not cleaning your room when I
Right.
ask you. You're just saying, here, put your boxing gloves on. I've got mine on. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
And if you instead approach them with curiosity, there's no boxing gloves, there's no ring, there's no nothing. We're just two people having a conversation about something that's not as positive as it could be.
Sure. And stepping back to that big picture. So I feel like you just gave us 3 steps. Like, number 1, take a breath. Number 2, step back, maybe, look beyond the room that day and who and what you want your child to become. And I like that idea of transforming fear into curiosity. So the fear that you're not doing something right, the fear that you're failing as a parent is kind of what it comes down to, whether we admit that, consciously or not, and just having an attitude of curiosity. Just yesterday, I left to go to high school youth group with my oldest and realized my 8-year-old had left his coat in the front yard. And I said, oh boy, what do you think, Paul? Should I bring that in for John or should I let him learn? Like making parenting decisions with my teenager, it was just kind of funny. And I said, let's see where it is when we get home. We get home at 8 o'clock. It's dark. It's still out there. And I'm like, oh man, it might be more work for me if I let him learn this lesson by failure. And it was so funny. Paul said, just put it in the garage. Make him think he left it outside, but that it won't get wet. So it was like, I mean, that's like a silly little story, but ultimately, yeah, for me, the coat's outside. I could have gotten upset. Oh, he's so irresponsible. This is so frustrating. I shouldn't have to do his work for him, but instead, I think I did okay. And like stepping back and going, what's the life lesson here? Ironically, the 5-year-old had left his coat in the backyard. So his coat's full of slugs and soaked.
Oh
But
no.
we did save the 8-year-old's coat and had it in the garage, but then like the 8-year-old still had that like, oh no, where's my coat? Like trying to get that lesson going without the slugs. We got slugs anyway. So, curiosity, you never know what'll quite happen when you turn on that curiosity.
And I think, I mean, you said it was a silly story, and I think it's a perfect story. I think it illustrates it perfectly because we have the opportunity to make so many decisions in parenting on a daily
Oh
basis,
my gosh.
minute by minute by minute. And if we're just kind of mindlessly reacting to whatever they're giving us, then it's almost like driving a car with a blindfold on. Like, how are we going to go where we need to go if we're not even looking at where we're going? So I think it's great that you approach that with curiosity and you weighed some different options, and then you talk to your older child. That's so smart. Our older kids have plenty of ideas about how to parent the younger ones.
They do. They're going to be such good parents because they've like been immersed in being part of it in a way.
Yeah, and their ideas many times are really creative and not something that we would think of.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
I love that.
it was so good. So I can see how all these techniques so far can like reduce the stress, reduce the chaos, reduce the power struggles. Always the goal. Now you talk about too. I always like to pull this into the kitchen, and you've talked about some adventures in the kitchen with your children. So how are food and family and reducing that stress all sort of intertwined for you?
Well, it's really interesting. Food has kind of woven through different little parts of our family. My kids, from when they were so little, probably 3, 4 years old, the oldest one, always wanted to make breakfast in bed for me on Mother's Day. So my husband would always get up and tell me, the first time he told me, this is what we're doing, so you can't get up.
Right.
So I'd have to sleep in no matter what. And then they would bring it to me. And then when they were little, they would bring their little homemade things that they created in school. And I'm telling you what, that is better than any gift on the planet. Don't give me a Ferrari, a mansion, a trip around the world. Just make me a little construction paper card with little kid writing and says, Mommy. Oh my gosh, that's it. I'm done.
Aw.
So that's one thing that is just, I have so many warm memories of those mornings. And then a really interesting thing happened when my 17-year-old went to high school. He signed up for a cooking class and he loved it so much. He was so engaged in that class that he took the second class, and they only offer 2. If they offered more, I'm telling you, he would have taken them all. He loved it. And then as a result of that, he began taking a lot of pride in making dinners for our family. Now, he doesn't do it often. He's busy. He's got his own things. He works. He plays a sport. He's going to school. He's got all that stuff. But still, once in a while, he will be motivated to make dinner. And he hates following recipes. He loves to just feel his way through, and he'll do a pinch of this and a dash of that and chop up some of this and throw it in there. And it's so fun to watch him experiment in the kitchen. He doesn't want any help. Nobody can help him chop. Nobody can suggest anything. We just have to kind of be hands off, don't make any comments, and just enjoy his culinary adventures. And I would say that he's got a pretty good sense of how to combine different things. I mean, he's watched us cook different things over the years and helped us and stuff, but it's really fun when you get to see the fruits of that effort where they're actually starting to fly solo and do it, because then you know when they leave home they're not going to live off of macaroni and cheese and ramen.
Yeah, well, yeah, you couldn't have stated our mission at Kids Cook Real Food any better. And that's like the perfect vision for mothers of younger children to imagine, oh my goodness, the day when they're independent in the kitchen. But I think it's also a great example of what you talk about, like being together, working together, maybe not having your expectations in a certain place. Like you had to let him cook with his own personality, and now you're you're stepping back completely, and just you have to just be curious, right? And what will be the next meal, and embrace the fact that he's cooking no matter how it turns out, and kind of release some of that worry. Does any of this have anything to do with the platform technique that you use with your clients and members in your course?
Well, it certainly could. At this point, I don't think I need it when he's cooking, because I've been able to successfully hand the reins over to him when he wants to do it. And I just accept that it's going to be a culinary adventure, whether I like it or not, whether I like the product or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be fun. And even if I don't necessarily like what he's created, I love the fact that he created it. So I'm going to enjoy it no matter what. But the platform technique can very successfully play into this for someone who is trying to hand the reins over to their child. Now, whether that's help allowing them to start chopping vegetables like your daughter so impressively did when we were at the Dr. Nandy show. Oh
Mm-hmm.
my goodness. Whether it's something like that where you're just starting to let them do more stuff in the kitchen, or all the way to like with my son where you just kind of let them have free reign. At any point, if you're feeling a little bit if you're feeling attached to your expectations, if you're feeling a little resistant to giving up the control. Now, certainly you want to make sure they're safe. Like you are always
Mm-hmm.
talking about, you want to make sure that they're using a knife appropriately and keeping their fingers safe, and using kitchen appliances correctly, and they've been taught and they know. And I mean, you can't just hand them the stuff and walk away,
It's a
but
process, exactly.
it's a process, and step by step, one thing at a time, as you know. But at any point along that line, if you notice that you're feeling a little bit fearful or resistant or something, and you could be fearful and it could be legitimate, and what it's telling you is your child's not quite ready for that big knife,
Mm-hmm.
in which case you have to honor that and say, you know what, let's wait a couple weeks before we do this. Let's try again. Right now, we're just going to knead dough, or we're going to mix and measure and pour and, set the oven, whatever other things that aren't like that. But if your concern and your fear is not based in like a safety thing, and you realize it's more about, I don't want them to spill or make a mess or get things sticky. If it's something like that, I think the platform technique can be really beneficial. Would you like me to kind of go over that a little bit?
Yeah, can you do like a 1 to 2 minute overview that we can use? And I love that it's for those moments when you're feeling that you're getting in your own way of parenting. I guarantee anyone listening is like, I already think of a situation, right?
Yes.
So what's the
Yes.
platform technique? Quick overview.
So this is something that you can do at any point. Um, it's probably a little more challenging to do while you're having a conversation with someone, because you have to kind of keep your mind engaged in the technique. But certainly before you start cooking, you could do it, or as you're allowing them to take the reins and do the mixing or the pouring or whatever, you can kind of do it in your mind in the background. But basically what it is you can close your eyes, you can leave your eyes open, it doesn't matter. One of my clients loved to do it while she was doing the dishes. She loved to practice it. So it can be done during an activity if you need to call upon it in that moment.
Mhm.
So you kind of just close your eyes or open them, and then you imagine yourself sitting on a train platform, and you're all by yourself on this train platform. And when you have a thought, oh my gosh, is my child going to spill this? you envision it like a train pulling into the station. So it's a thought train, right? It pulls in, and you can choose at that moment whether you get on the train or you stay on the platform. If you get on the train, it's going to yank you down the line 10 stops down the line. So you might think, oh my gosh, is my child going to spill something right here? Oh, if they spill something, I'm going to have a huge mess. And then it's going to make a stain. And then we're going to spend our whole afternoon cleaning it up. And I can't even believe why I got into this in the first place. And what was I even thinking? And then before you know it, you're way down there and you don't even know how you got there. And you're not even paying attention at all to what's happening. You're just worried about the possibility of spilling. So when you realize that you've been hijacked and kidnapped and taken down the line, bring yourself back to the platform. So the platform is actually the present moment, which is where we want to be. So if we are sitting on that platform and we have that thought, oh my gosh, what if my child spills? The train pulls into the station. What if my child spills? You just recognize it as a thought. Oh, I had a thought. Oh, look at that. And then if you don't engage with that thought or get on the train, you'll see that it will pull out of the station, and then the next thought will come. And maybe the next thought is, what if they don't measure correctly? They're going to pour too much in. You can recognize it as a thought, but not engage with it. And then that will pull out of the station. And then, initially you might have rapid fire trains coming one after the other, because our minds are monkey minds and they just
so
keep
much.
going.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking. That was perfect. That there was like 10 thoughts down and just snowballs like crazy.
Right. So if you can practice this whenever you can, it gets easier to use it when you need to call upon it. So then in time, you'll notice that the trains start slowing down. Now, only the most deeply trained Buddhist monks are going to be able to have no trains pull into the station. We are all human. I wouldn't even attempt to achieve that, but we can slow down how fast the trains come, and we can work at not getting on them. And we could have 5 thoughts in a row that we don't engage with, and then the 6th thought comes and man, it snags us before we realize it, and we're down the line. And then we just come back. We just say, oh, wait. This is where I want to be, right here in this moment.
Okay. So this is a pretty intense mental exercise. We will fail. We will get on some trains that we shouldn't. And it's all about just reorienting, adjusting at the end of the day, maybe looking back over your day and going, ooh, missed it there. And kind of, do you imagine, like if you let's say you get on a train that you shouldn't get on at 3 p.m. At 10 p.m. you're in your bed. Well, I'm not yet, but normal good people are in their beds at 10 p.m. And you're thinking over your day and you're going, oh, I got on that train I shouldn't have. Do you then kind of imagine that platform and that thought and picture it going by, like because you messed that up, so you imagine it correctly?
Well, I guess you certainly could.
Okay. But usually you're practicing on opportunities that will come up in your parenting life the next day kind of thing, or the next hour.
You don't practice what you anticipate tomorrow. You just practice what's happening now, because I guarantee you, no matter what hour of the day, no matter what minute of the hour, no matter what's happening now or what happened yesterday or what happened tomorrow, no matter when you practice it, you're going to be bombarded with thought trains pulling into the station.
Got it.
So the more you practice it in that moment with what's happening now, right now, you and I are having a conversation, but if I wasn't deeply engaged in our conversation from practicing the platform technique, I might be thinking about, oh, what am I going to cook for dinner tonight? And my mind will be out there, but I won't actually be paying attention to the conversation that we're having. Or I might think about, what do I have to do tomorrow? Or do my kids have activities tonight? Whatever, who knows what will be on my mind. But if that's on my mind, then I'm not present with our conversation. So you can practice this anytime, anywhere, in any situation.
Got it. So the ultimate goal is see the thought, acknowledge the thought, don't let the thought control you, and come back to the present.
Yeah, and a lot of people, when they first start practicing it, will feel anxious because they'll think, well, what if I have a thought, but it's a really important one, and I don't want to forget it? Yeah. Well, 9 times out of 10, if it's that important, it will come back to you. If you say, oh, I have to remember to call the dentist and make an appointment, whatever. Well, that's an important thought, but trust me, later you're going to remember, oh, that's right, I needed to call the dentist. Let me take care of that. So the really important thoughts will 9 times out of 10 come back. And then the ones that are not important, who cares if they come back or not?
Very interesting. Now, I know that our lives are so busy, and I think the platform technique kind of points to that we have so many thoughts at any given moment. But our kids are also feeling a lot of stress and pressure, and we know statistically that anxiety
Yes.
is one of the issues that kids are facing that's increasing the most of all. And it just tears my heart apart to hear that kindergartners are being, clinically diagnosed with anxiety. Like, what in the world? You talk a lot about this, Erin. What's your number one way to help a child who is feeling anxious?
Well, I think I was talking to a colleague of mine the other day, and she said something that I think is so true. Anxiety is contagious.
Mm,
It's contagious like a cold. So the very first thing that we have to do when our child is feeling anxious is we have to lower our own anxiety. Because if they're anxious and then if they're up here and then we immediately go up here to match them, it's like putting gasoline on the fire. We're not going to help them if we're as anxious or more anxious than they are. So what we need to do very first of all is try to get a grip on our own anxiety, try to calm ourselves, soothe ourselves, lower our own anxiety through breathing, deep breathing, through meditation. Another really cool deep breathing thing is the vagus nerve. Have you ever heard about the vagus nerve?
oh, yeah, from the brain to the gut, right? Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the nerve that connects all of our organs up to our brain. And so our breath is what tells the vagus nerve whether we should be in fight or flight or everything's safe and we're good. So if we're breathing really shallowly or quickly, then it's sending messages through our vagus nerve up to our brain going, oh my gosh, you know what? There's real danger here. This is life or death. We need to be in fight or flight. And then
Mhm.
our anxiety rises. If instead we breathe slowly and actually more slowly out than in, it's actually the out part that's for whatever reason sending the signals. So if we can breathe maybe like in for 2 breaths and out for 4, and we do that for at a minimum of several breaths,
Mhm.
then we're kind of sending repeated messages to our brain. There's no danger here. We can calm down. We can lower our blood pressure. We can lower our heart rate. All that adrenaline that's coursing through our veins, we can just drop that now because there's no danger. And that is a terrific way to show up for your child who's feeling anxious. And then furthermore, you can teach your child these techniques. And you can teach your child what's actually happening when they're feeling anxious.
Mm.
So instead of getting caught in the anxiety, like we can't see the forest for the trees, instead of being caught in it, oh, what if this happens? Oh, I'm worried. Oh, I can't believe it. My test and my teacher, and what if I fail and I make a fool of myself? And when they're swirling, instead of being stuck in the swirl, we can teach them how to step out of it and say, oh, okay, there's this thing coming up tomorrow that I'm nervous about, but it's making me so anxious.
Mhm.
So I have these tools that I can use now. I can do this deep breathing. I can practice the platform technique. I can breathe out slower than I breathe in. I can bring myself down and calm myself down. Then they can start to step out of that whirlwind of anxiety and start to see it for what it is, which is an uninvited guest in our home. An
Mm.
intruder, I would say, an uninvited intruder.
Mhm. Absolutely. And it's something I've been doing with my daughter. Actually, we have a tool called Heart Math that
Mm-hmm.
teaches like the breathing, and it kind of connects your heart and brain and breath all together. Because it's so important to practice it before you're feeling anxious, because it's hard enough. I mean, it's hard to tap into even that skill even when it's practiced. Like, I'll say to my kids, oh, like, you sound like you need to do some heart math breathing, we'll call it, and sometimes they're so anxious that they just can't even tap into that skill. So it's
Mm-hmm.
super important to keep practicing it in normal times. uh,
Yes.
and now, Erin, your course on this topic, Destination Peace, is for parents and kids, kind of about anxiety. Can you unpack that just in maybe like the 2-minute overview for us about what parents might find for you to help them with their anxious kids?
Sure. I have created this course to teach parents all about anxiety. So we look at what anxiety is, we look at how it shows up physically, emotionally, behaviorally,
Okay.
and then we look at lots of different ways, like the platform technique, lots of different ways that we can begin to address the anxiety and reduce it or help them to reduce it. And yeah, so we look at what it is, how it shows up, and how you can begin to help your child and you to manage it.
Yeah, sounds like a nice blend of the science behind what's going on and some really practical strategies. So if the breathing and the platform technique resonate with you and feel like things your family could use, Erin has more where that came from, right? Destination Peace. I love that name. That's so good. Now, I always love to leave parents with a message of hope, because sometimes when we get, parenting strategies, we get a little bit overwhelmed. So what would be your final message for everyone, message of hope for the world?
My message of hope would be that there's always a solution. You can always figure it out. No matter how bad it is, there is light at the end of the tunnel, and there's always a way to make it better.
I totally agree. Totally agree. So, in the midst of the stress and chaos of parenting, thank you, Erin Taylor, for being here and kind of sharing this calm, peaceful, all these strategies with us. We definitely appreciate your time.
Thank you, Katie. It was so much fun to chat with you.
And everyone who's listening, we will be back next week with another episode of the Healthy Parenting Connector to connect you parents who so fervently want to raise healthy kids with experts like Erin who have the information you need.